Okay, so with Bitfinex being an early Lightning adopter, did you have any concerns around the security of it? That that there might be vulnerabilities out there in the wild, or that potentially an attacker could try to, let's say, grief the node or do all kinds of things to Bitfinex's Lightning nodes?
So, we at Bitfinex had an in-depth review of Lightning, and I think that one of the most important things that Bitfinex did was actually prove that Lightning was already a well thought and secure network, right? We were the first exchange, I think, to launch 5 Bitcoin channels just to prove that it could be used as a safe way to transact and send out or receive even large amount of money. 5 Bitcoin were at peak quite a lot of money, around 300K. So we are seeing nowadays more and more usage on a daily basis by traders that are, want to get in or out of positions pretty quickly, and they want to send Bitcoin collateral or send out Bitcoin collateral. So I think that is super interesting. But the one of the core functions on an exchange, right, especially an exchange that has been around for such a long time, like Bitfinex, and has been always loyal to the ethos of Bitcoin, is actually not being scared of technology, right? If we were scared, so without this type of approach, you wouldn't have Bitcoin in general, right? So there is always a little bit of risk in doing things, but it's more important. It's really important to have an in-depth review, do your own audit, do your own research, and then you should really embrace Bitcoin technology, right? We did that with also Liquid. We have been supporting Segwit pretty soon. I think that for us is always been, we love tech and we love Bitcoin, and we feel like our role is to demonstrate that despite all the FUD, um, most of this technology is actually extremely safe. And nowadays, Bitfinex has the biggest Lightning nodes, I think, still that have around altogether 700 Bitcoin, right? So it is not small money, and we feel really comfortable. We have our setup with watchtowers, and of course, we have our own. We protect ourselves, we protect our customer money, of course, but still, we feel really, really comfortable in running these big nodes. And I always say that. Bitcoin tech is the most solid one. You don't know. So I'm the guy that run, the nodes on the backend, installs all the upgrades of all the blockchain nodes as well, right? So and the reality is that Bitcoin and Lightning nodes are the most solid ones. You don't know how many times I have to restart, upgrade. All the other blockchain nodes is like everything else seems really kept together by rubber and bands.
Right. And so sometimes on Twitter, we see these debates around how easy it is to sync up a node, and we see various debates. And some of that devolves into technical debates about exactly what qualifies. Should it be a full node? What about an archival node? What about fast sync and so on? But I suppose hearing it from the exchange CTO who has to run all of these different chains, I guess that's the real market test, let's say. And just as you said before, right, with security and people saying, well, oh, we don't know if Lightning is secure yet, but at the same time, you're putting into practice with almost 700 Bitcoin, which at today's value is, what's that, like 15 million or more in USD terms, probably even more than that. So, we're talking serious money. And so I think it's interesting to see that. I'm also curious as well, because this is another line we see on the Lightning front, is we see people saying, oh, look, there's not that many people using Lightning today. A lot of people would rather use altcoins or use maybe even stablecoins and things like that. I'm curious what your view is on that, because you obviously being part of Bitfinex and have working with companies like, say, Bitrefill. I guess you sort of have some insight into that as well. But I guess the question I'm asking is, do you foresee Lightning being used for day-to-day commerce and taking up, or do you see it as it's just going to linger for some time until later?
So first of all, people don't prefer to my so people don't prefer altcoins to transact, right? So the reality is that people prefer altcoins to speculate because it's really easier for someone that have inside information, in some project to make 100x in profit, right? Because there is some token that is backed by VC that is pumping, and you can still make in 6 months 100x. That is extremely difficult with Bitcoin if you think about it, because Bitcoin, in order for Bitcoin to grow in value, there has to be there is kind of a longer process in a rightful way, right? So it's not like you create value out of thin air. There is a community, there is a lot of work, there is adoption, there is nation state adoption that needs to happen. And so, but that is what money should be, right? It's not, the money shouldn't be something that create value out of thin air and is extremely speculative. Money should be something that people feel comfortable in holding for different reasons, and that's why we are seeing a lot of usage of altcoins that is fully speculation. And of course, when you have some bags of altcoins, you might want to throw them to somewhere to buy something or exchange them for something in order to get out some value. But I would distinguish the usage of altcoins compared to Bitcoin when it comes to actual as a payment system, so or like a a transfer system. So nowadays we are seeing stablecoins and actually Tether mainly to be used as the primary way of transacting wealth transacting for micropayments, right? So that is, I think that Tether in this moment is serving as a easier approach to digital money for the majority of the people, because not everyone understands Bitcoin from the get-go. And I want to be clear that I don't think that Tether is superior than Bitcoin. There is only one Bitcoin. Tether is centralized, right? Tether is a centralized token using a decentralized transport layer. So there is no Bitcoin. Still, it's is a system that, at least for the time being, right? So it offers a good an on ramp for people, as well as probably, as I said, an easier approach to understand the technology, right? So my father, before moving to Bitcoin, had to have a wallet on his phone that was similar to PayPal, but was holding day after day the same value, the value that he was expecting, right? So his life and the majority of people's life is still based on fiat standard rather than Bitcoin standard. In the future, that might change, and would be really happy to see that changing, right? So maybe in 20 years we will not need Tether, who knows? But nowadays, I think Tether is something that still has its utility and is used a lot as a payment system. I think that as a store wealth, Bitcoin is definitely more used and is definitely also more superior, because it has so many inherent values, right, in terms of confiscatability and censorable money, financial freedom, and so on and so forth. So I think that there is this sort of dualism between Bitcoin and Tether in that sense. When it comes to stablecoins, I think that is 99.9% speculation. We'll see what the history will tell, but at this
Yeah, sure.
it is what I feel, at least now. But when it comes to Bitrefill, you mentioned, I love Bitrefill, by the way. I think is one of the most brilliant ideas that we have as a company in the crypto space. And by the way, is a good example of how a company can build a product or can build a huge use case. That's something that is serving millions of people without to have or invent yet another token, right? So think like Sergey and the team are doing wonders, are really fundamental part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. Really like that. But definitely there are heavy users of Lightning before ourselves, and we are settling. A Bitfinex user can buy Bitrefill gift cards, and the transaction is immediately settled via Lightning. So I think that is a brilliant example as a use case where Lightning can help two companies to settle immediately, overcoming the FX problem, because our user pay immediately. There is no time to wait, and Bitrefill can hedge themselves immediately on the price of which they bought the gift cards from the supplier. So that is, and we are seeing that also in El Salvador, right? So we are seeing big companies like McDonald's or Starbucks that are being asked to adopt Bitcoin Lightning payments, and and they did, right? So in a way is see, you don't need, it's not that complex if there is a good reason for it, right? So people think that Bitcoin or Lightning payments are really complex, but then when asked for or when pushed, even big companies and corporations are don't take much time to support it. So most of the time it's just goodwill and and priorities.
I see. Yeah, and I think to the point around comparing, let's say, Bitcoin usage versus, let's say, stablecoin usage as well, as you were mentioning, it seems that historically a lot of people were very high time preference in the Bitcoin sense, where they would pay a lot of fees to move between exchanges very quickly. And it seems that over the years, it seems like some of that volume has kind of shifted into stablecoins. Like that's kind of my understanding of how some of that's shifted. But then I'm curious as well, from your perspective, in terms of Tether customers and users, did it start with that trader use case, but actually now we're seeing non-traders who are using Tether and stablecoins?
Yeah, I think that initially Tether was created in 2014. Tether is the company that created this entire stablecoin market, and was initially was just to provide a better way to do cross exchange arbitrage, right? In order for a financial industry to mature, especially a new one like the Bitcoin one, you need to make sure that the price of Bitcoin across exchanges is as aligned and as possible, right? You cannot have an exchange like in 2013 that has Bitcoin trading at $1,000, another that is trading at $1,200, right? In finance, in trading, when this happens, there are traders that sell Bitcoin on exchange where the price is higher and buy back on the exchange where the price is lower. In order to do this, you need to move Bitcoin from one exchange to another. That is fairly easy. It takes 10 minutes on average. And but the problem was that in 2014, in order to move fiat from one exchange to another, it was taking 5 days because all international fiat transfers, and was really painful. So the brilliant and simple idea of Tether was, why we don't reuse Bitcoin as a technology, but we put a dollar on the blockchain. Simple as that. So started all with this small concept. And over the years, then people figured out that actually Tether could be used as an inflation hedge, could be used, think about Turkey or Argentina. At some point, like in last month, Tether was trading 6% above the dollar in Argentina, and was same in Turkey. I was talking to this friend in Turkey, and he said, "Look, as he has his children, right? So, and he thought that, as many parents do, they think, okay, I want my children to go and study abroad, want to see more cultures. But the problem with the devaluation of Turkish lira, that devaluated around 80% in the last 16 months, at the end of the year, he's going to be poorer than at the beginning of the year compared to foreign countries. So, if, for example, if he wants to send his children to study in Europe or in the US, it cannot, because he lost 80% of his buying power against the dollar, or a little bit less against the euro. So he's using Tether to save money, because he was just to save money. Doesn't want to speculate. He doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to be able to give for what to his children a better life. I think there is nothing wrong with that. But that is, if you think about it, is a huge case that makes sense for everyone, right? In Argentina, Brazil, is even Italy, right? We are all people that have been emigrating everywhere, right? And in order to do that, you need to be able to have some money put aside. So it's becoming kind of a way to save money, a way to combat the devaluation of national currencies all around the world, and also is considered by some countries. We are seeing the parallel government of Myanmar, like NUG, from led by San Suu Kyi, was adopted Tether as their legal tender. And that is, although again, Tether is a centralized money, it is a way that it allows also this type of freedom acts that same happened with Ukraine, that when the war started, they announced that they would accept three currencies. The first one was Bitcoin, second Ethereum, and the third one was USDT. So we are seeing more and more use cases of stablecoins around the world. Is money that is faster, is programmable, is at least a bit more censorship resistant than the other. There is now a big question mark and after the last few days events, but still, I think there is it's something that is changing dramatically the way we are looking at money, fiat money, in the next 10 years.
So as I read you then, you're seeing it, maybe it's like an onboarding tool in your views. You're seeing it like for the people who aren't ready to go straight to Bitcoin, they might use Tether as like their little bridging way of kind of getting there. And I guess, as you're saying, this is for people who are potentially not capable of dealing with Bitcoin's volatility, because if you're going to use Bitcoin like all in as a saving, then you have to be willing to do that over the long term. And as part of that, generally you need to be able to at least have enough income so that you don't have to spend it now, because otherwise you're going to have to spend down all your Bitcoin in like a bear cycle. And, obviously that's not advisable, although, it has to be done if it has to be done, right? But I guess, so to the point, as you were saying, around the censorship resistance aspects, I'm curious whether you see stablecoins as like, are we going to see a lot more regulation come? So I guess probably there's two main angles I could see. One is kind of like this idea of, if governments around the world try to regulate stablecoins as a money market fund or as a bank or in some way, or the other one would be probably some kind of KYC AML requirement on the users of the stablecoins. So I'm curious, from your point of view, do you see those as like big risks for stablecoins, or do you see it more like this is just a big growing market, and that's just going to be part of the process of, let's say, quote unquote, being able to be accepted by governments?
So there is a lot to unpack here, right? There is also the concept of CBDCs and the competition with the privately issued stable coins, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
and it's all about, there is of course there are privacy concerns and so on and so forth, right? We even in the US, a bill was proposed to Congress to ban the US from doing their own CBDC for the potential risk in terms of privacy. For example, if you go and buy a coffee and pay with your credit card, nowadays the central government will not get that information, right, from your credit card, right? So the credit card will only signal transactions that are suspicious, right? Big amounts, up maybe above $10,000, and they are suspicious, right? So if you are buying like a car, it doesn't matter, right? But for example, if you are interacting with something that or someone that they deem nasty, they will signal your transactions, called suspicious activity report. Now, but in a CBDC world, the scare, the fear is that CBDCs could be used by central governments to track every single action of every single citizen and control their decisions because they can control their money, right? So it is probably is pushed a little bit to the extreme, but you can see how in some countries that can easily happen. So it is interesting. I think that when it comes to CBDCs, they are not actually a competitor of privately issued stablecoins like Tether, but CBDCs could be still used as a way to, as I was mentioned before, improve the interbanking system and settlement system, right? So imagine that now is based on rubber and bands that cost to taxpayers a ton of money on a yearly basis. So taxpayers are spending, everything is flowing into the pockets of governments that didn't improve their the fundamental technological infrastructure in the last 30 years. So if we use a little bit of blockchain technology, peer-to-peer technology, and so on, could be a leap forward that will reduce the maintenance cost of a public financial infrastructure by a big margin. So I don't mind to see blockchain used in that sense. In a way, money has been digital for the last 30 years already, right? So it's just what CBDCs could do is just to do a leap forward and forget about 30 years of technology and just adopt the last stage of technology when it comes to financial settlements that are blockchain. I don't have any problem with that. I think could be even an intelligent move. But when it comes to privately issued stablecoins, you can imagine that no central bank will issue on Ethereum or Solana or on Tron or whatever, right? So they will never take the risk of picking one or picking a winner. They will never take the security implications about Imagine like a CBDC issued on Ethereum, and now there is the merge, the verge, the splurge. How I don't know all these names, but you can see like people scratching their head and say and thinking, okay, now what we are doing, are we supporting Ethereum proof of work or proof of stake? I mean, that's not how the Fed would act, right? So they don't want to get into these problems. So I think there is a big case for privately issued stablecoins. This is long story to get to this point. Then definitely regulations are coming. From there are two aspects of I think regulators are really interesting. Although there is a lot of noise around stable coins, actually the thing that from what we are hearing is regulators are more interested to regulate is actually DeFi, right? So and stable coins are a good proxy for DeFi because they are the ones that are more used in lending pools to provide yields and interest. Basically, they are the ones that DeFi pools are considered the tools used to subtract revenue to banks. Right, we have been living in a world for the last 13 years. The interest rates on bank deposits were almost zero. And so, you can see that the first opportunity when people could get 10% yield per year, they would take it, right? So was much better than losing money or not making any money on your bank deposits. But that is what regulators can call systemic risk, right? So if everyone started to pull out money from their banks, what happens, right? What could happen? These banks might be subject to a bank run and be bankrupt, right? So they really don't want to see that happening. So that's why what I'm hearing is that the one of the main concerns is actually DeFi lending. Also, on the other side, you have stable coins regulations that definitely are something that that is extremely interesting to follow. In one case, we believe that stable coins should be regulated as cash, right? So we have primary markets. So when a customer acquires or redeems a stable coin through Tether or our competitors, and the secondary markets are blockchain movements, right? So on blockchains, of course, as Tether, we comply with the requirements that law enforcement has asked us. For example, we collaborate in freezing assets when they asked us to do so, and so on. Remember, Tether is a centralized stablecoin using a decentralized transport layer, right? So we use the banking system because everyone talks about dollar-based stable coins, right? So everyone and their sisters are trying to create their new stable coin that is fully decentralized. But all the attempts so far have not been great. So either they are too small, so no one cares and they don't have much utility, or when they become big, actually they were taking on so much risk, like Terra, that then became systemic and completely wiped out 80% of the value of the crypto industry. So the problem there is that everyone wants. So here is the absurdity in a certain sense. People want dollar stablecoins, but also people want these dollar stablecoins to be fully decentralized, but they want to use these dollar stablecoins to then cash out, right? So, and now you scratch your head because you want to cash out, so you want someone given access to or accepting that you can go back to your bank account, but you want it to be fully decentralized. And so, I mean, there is not a good way to make it work, right? So someone has to deal with the banks. And if someone has to deal with the banks, it means that you are still recognizing the importance of the traditional banking industry, right? Because, you want to cash out and buy a house, a car, whatever, or a laptop, whatever, a phone. So in a way, I feel like people should make up their minds, right? So if you want a dollar stablecoin, you should be ready to have some compromises. Otherwise, there is Bitcoin, right? To me, anything that is not Bitcoin is inherently centralized. I'm happy to live with that concept, and I'm happy to that the Tether works well because is this bridge between the old and the new, and we believe that regulators eventually will see stable coins as something that definitely needs to be regulated, has to be subject to clear standards, providing like disclosures, providing a certain type of attestation or audit requirements, and so on and so forth. That is all fine, but it has to. We need this type of clarity, and hopefully they will see. And this is the path we are seeing. At least the current discussions are suggesting that stablecoins will allow to operate as they are operate on chain, but of course with still the requirements that we have of freezing, collaborating with law enforcement, and so on. So Tether in the last 18 months was able to collaborating with law enforcement, was able to give back to their legitimate owners around $100 million, right? So we have seen so many hacks around the world in DeFi, and in the end, the Tether has been this company that helped as much as it could to when someone is subject to a hack, they go to law enforcement, we get a request from law enforcement. If the judge confirms the stay, we freeze the funds and we work out a solution to provide back the funds to the legitimate owners. So that is also a good story, can be seen in both ways, right? So you can say, well, but you can freeze money, yes, but also you can help people in that way. So that's something that for a centralized stablecoin is, at least compared to a bank, is a big improvement, because banks are much slower in this type of approach in helping people, I believe, with their own funds. So it's such a changing, we are such in a changing moment for stablecoins that will be definitely exciting to see where we are going.
Yeah, sure. And so I'm also curious then, in terms of where things are going with the censorship, as you rightly said. So it's an openly centralized model, obviously, as opposed to the purported decentralized, idea. And so obviously over the last few days, we've seen this whole thing happen with the Tornado Cash. So for listeners who are unfamiliar, basically there was an Ethereum mixer protocol that essentially got sanctioned by the OFAC Treasury Office, meaning, especially for US individuals, that they are now not allowed to interact with this system. And so what we've seen is this weird interplay where, because of that OFAC action, USDC addresses, which is a competitor stablecoin, has been frozen, or at least certain components of it. And so it kind of creates this weird dynamic where I guess it just will mean stablecoin issuers will just have to be very sort of cognizant about what's going on in various governments around the world. And some of them may say, oh, we want you to freeze this. And then it might put you in a really awkward place, right? Because then you have to sort of like, okay, US government has told us to freeze this. This other government has said to freeze that. Is that basically the position you're kind of being put in?
Yeah, definitely is going to be tricky, right? So again, complying with requirements, regulatory requirements is going to be critical, because again, we are relying on the banking industry, right? So we need to maintain the same level of scrutiny that the banking industry has, right? There is no way around that. On this specific case, but in general, it's also important to understand that. So the big question that needs to be clarified is so there are two type of addresses, right, involved with stablecoins. There is the addresses that are owned by the stablecoin issuer, that are like the treasury wallet and the smart contract. It's a smart contract, and then there are addresses on the secondary market that are owned by the actual users, right? So the clarity, so there was never clarity on if stablecoin issuers, because there was never the chance to give this type of clarity historically, because it's such a new thing. So are stablecoin issuers required to freeze someone else's address as a blanket freeze, right? So this in this case, for example, well, we don't serve US customers in our case, right? This is what was suggested was a US requirement. But at the same time, the question is, because we have been working with many US-based law enforcement agencies recently, after the last few days, on things that are even related to this specific case, but has always been like a direct request of freezing specific addresses. Because keep in mind that, as you said, there are multiple regulators around the world, and the problem is that there are ongoing investigations on that are involving these addresses. So if you blanket freeze them, then you actually are interfering. You could be interfering with other regulators' investigations. So it's always like so you need to have a direct interaction. And so far, no one contacted Tether to freeze all those specific addresses, right? So it's important to comply with the requirements, of course. At the same time, it's important to have full clarity, because otherwise you're just doing actions randomly, and that could jeopardize the years of work of someone else, right? So it's super tricky. So it's not the perfect position to be.
Yeah, sure. And I think the other, obviously, this has been a line. This has been a line in the industry for years and years and years. People have been doing this whole line of, "Oh, Tether is pumping the price of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies and things like this." And I know this has been like a regular, I guess, line that we hear over and over. So I'm curious, what's been your response to that? And maybe if you could just outline for people a little bit on the process, like what happens, I guess, maybe without going like into the deepest technical detail, but if you could just kind of give us the basic idea of mechanically what's happening in terms of when new tethers are being printed and versus when tethers are being destroyed or redeemed.
So the process is pretty simple. So in order to acquire Tether, so we have a $100,000 limit. So we work only with, let's say, big clients, big institutions to acquire Tethers, right? So and redeem Tethers. So the process is you get so a customer wants to acquire USDT. They send $100,000 as a wire to our bank account, and we send back to their desired wallet 100,000 USDT tokens. A customer wants back his fiat. They send 100,000 USDT tokens to our treasury wallet, and we send them back a wire for $100,000 minus the fees, right? So there is both for issuance and redemption, there is 10 basis points fees. But that is as simple as really as simple as that. I think the big misconception, but I think is not like a genuine misconception for most of the time, is actually, there is this narrative that Tether has been pumping Bitcoin price. I think that is extremely stupid on many different for many different reasons, because it's like saying that the only reason why Bitcoin has value is because of Tether. That is, I think that everyone agrees that, or should agree, that is not the case. Bitcoin has a huge use case around the world, has been growing much before Tether, has been is being adopted by nations, is being adopted by huge institutions like Fidelity, BlackRock, and so on. So there is so Bitcoin has value, full stop, right? That is really important. It's like one of the probably the most important currency that we have nowadays. So the misconception is that Bitcoin price was going up because Tether was printed. But actually, the people the funds and institutions want to enter in Bitcoin, so they need to issue or acquire Tethers in order to buy Bitcoin, right? So the fact is that if you are if you want, and have seen a lot of these institutions recently, last year and a half, they wanted to get a huge Bitcoin exposure, right? We have seen many from Fidelity to all these big companies and Tesla and so on. All these companies are so they are using OTC desks or hedge funds in order to get exposure and buy position. So if you want to buy $500 million of Bitcoin, the dollars of Bitcoin, you don't send all the money to one exchange and click market buy, right? So you want to work with an OTC desk that will give you the best price, right? In order to get the best price, you need to work across multiple trading venues. And the last thing you want is to take $500 million and split in 15 wires and send 15 wires around. The easiest and most common use case is buying USDT, and there are basically every single exchange on this earth supports USDT. So you take you buy USDT once, and you send this USDT to the 15 different trading venues, and you can. And by the way, the USDT markets are the most liquid markets. So it's as simple as that, right? In order to buy Bitcoin at the best price with the highest liquidity, you use the USDT markets. And so in order to do that, you need to acquire USDT. And so in a way, we are the central liquidity pool for the entire crypto ecosystem.
I see, yeah. And so I think that's also, yeah, so I guess in simple terms, new tethers are created when a person wires, USD into the Tether bank account, and then the reverse process is when they are destroying tethers. It's the other way around. They want to redeem that fiat cash back into their bank account. Okay, same process. And then I guess the other aspect is Tether travels across different blockchains, right? So it's on Liquid, it's on various altcoins, it's on etc. So yeah, I think perhaps where I'm seeing it is I would prefer people to just go straight to Bitcoin, but I understand there's a demand out there. Maybe I'm not necessarily the market for that, but I can recognize there are people out there who do use that. And so they may be using, let's say, Blockstream Green, or they may be using the Tether. I think Tether has a native wallet or its own wallet application. And so I suppose those are some of the main things. I think the other questions that people have, maybe some listeners are wondering as well, is thoughts around, the bank accounts, the reserving, the audits, and these questions that people sort of have. So I know there's been a bit of a storied history with Tether, so I'm curious if you could sort of give people just a bit of an understanding about, the use of different reserves in terms of Tether's balance sheet. So that people are understanding what's going on at Tether, so they can get a picture from that.
Sure. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that Tether is this black sheep that doesn't have audits, while everyone else and all its competitors have full audits. And that, of course, is not true, because actually the industry standard and every single stablecoin issuer is relying on attestation. So what has been produced on a quarterly or monthly basis by stablecoin issuers are actually attestations and not full audits. So we think that in the next 2 years, the industry standard will move to full audits, and Tether is actually actively working to have a full audit. We don't know about the others, but we believe that we could be one of the first, if not the first, to have that. So on a continuous basis. So one of the other interesting and most discussed parts is the famous commercial papers, right? So actually, Tether voluntarily in 2021, with the first attestation, produced something that no other stablecoin had at that time, was called breakdown or reserves, right? So in our breakdown reserve, so all the stablecoins were saying, well, we have all the money, don't worry, right? But we went one step further, and we said, okay, we have this stuff in our portfolio, and there were $30 billion of commercial papers, and people started questioning that. So we said, okay, fine, you want to see a bit more. Let us give you the ratings of these commercial papers. And the result was that vast majority was A1 or A2 rated by Standard & Poor's. So super safe stuff, right? It's not like you get the commercial paper from the grocery dealer at the end of the street. Is stuff that is extremely liquid, stuff that has just a few basis point more in return in interest than U.S. Treasuries. So things that you can sell on the market without any loss. So still, there was a lot of concern remaining, right? So what we said publicly was June 2021. We said, fine, we are going to phase out commercial papers in order to do that, and we are going to increase our U.S. Treasuries exposure. So what we started doing that, and at the end of this July, so July 2022, from 30 billion previous year, we went down to 3.5 billion, 3.4 billion. And by the end of August, so in 20 days, around 20 days, we will be at 200 million. And by October, we'll be zero. So we have been, I think that this has been, and no Chinese commercial papers, all this stuff, right, that has been around has been really concocted to make us look bad. But inherently, I think even with the last 2 months has been showing that Tether is actually, the company that doesn't take the same risk that all the other heroes or considered heroes of our industry were taking, right? So everyone, since the Terra Luna crash, everyone was looking at Tether, right? So much Tether news. I have been doing probably 100 interviews, right? Always repeating the same thing, right? We were the only institution that was able, even including traditional financial institutions, that was able to pay out $7 billion that were 10%, or always it has to be proportional, 10% of our reserves in 48 hours. In recent financial history, there was one institution called Washington Mutual. They went bankrupt because they had to pay 10% of their reserves in 10 days. So we did much better, and they went bankrupt. We didn't have any issues. In 1 month, we paid $20 billion. That were 25% of our reserves. Without the blink of an eye, we could have done much more. But yeah, during all this period, right, everyone was looking at us and concerned about Tether. It happened that actually all the mighty heroes of our crypto community, were taking loans, right, without any collateral, without any backing. They were doing the craziest things, right? Some of these were even public companies under the SEC overview. How that could have happened, right? And some of these companies are owned by some of our biggest critics, right? So you now scratch your head saying, okay, why? So you're criticizing me, but what the hell is happening there? Because it feels to me that if you are giving a loan, you should be overly collateralized, and yet we were the only guys that demonstrate how this should be done, right? So if you are offering a loan, you should be over collateralized with something that is extremely liquid, and we demonstrated that really, really well. So. Long story short, definitely a lot of misconceptions around Tether. We should have done, I think, a much better job in terms of communicating with our community these type of things, and I think that nowadays, recently, we started doing that much better. Right? It's true that one interesting fact is that until was May last year, May 2021, Tether didn't even have a marketing team, right? Or a PR team. So we thought, really naively, and I can say this openly, that you have just to keep your head down, work, and everything will be fine. But we realized that it's not always like that, and we were naive, right? Also a little bit dumb, but because of course people need to have information, and but the fact that you are not waving around and doing all huge marketing events doesn't mean that you are a bad guy. Maybe it just means that you are focused on your own stuff. But we realize that we have to improve, and we fix that. We are fixing that, right? We want to be more and more provide more and more information. we are stepping up the game also when it comes to attestations, and you might see that in the next few days, and so on. So definitely many things changed, but I think that these last recent events should be a teaching moment that when maybe Tether was used as a distraction, while the rest of the industry was taking the bad parts from the 2008 financial crisis playbook.
Yeah, unfortunately, and so as you said, the so-called heroes of shitcoin Twitter. So yeah, we won't go too into that, but I think it's interesting as well just to see how quickly the market has grown. Right over the last few years, it seems that the whole stablecoin market now. Yes, it took a bit of a crash after the whole Terra Luna blow up, but I'm curious your thoughts on what that portends and this notion that in some sense, like yes, it's US dollar denominated, but in a sense, you're kind of like you're almost like a central bank, and you're holding like reserves, like US Treasuries, uh, and in some sense, you'll become like over time, if Tether just keeps growing, you become a larger and larger uh, kind of central bank in a sense. Although not that you're issuing loans and things like that, but in a loose sense. I'm curious, do you see that perhaps a lot of people around the world will kind of run to USD because let's say their local currency is horrible, right? Like I have family in Sri Lanka. They got wrecked on LKR, massive devaluation, and I'm sure there are people out there in various countries around the world who want this product. So I'm curious your view. Do you believe that in some sense it helps? There'll be a lot of people out there who are just running to USD and then they're just going to run to stablecoin, and so that means it's kind of bullish on on stablecoins as a market.
So you can argue that the stable coins are actually uh, an instrument to increase the hyper-dollarization of the world, right? So, and that is an argument that we heard a lot also in the Congress talks, right? For good or for worse, that is also true, right? So, as you said, and that is what we are seeing every day. Companies and private people, especially private people, are running to the dollar. But think about Argentinians. An Argentinian person can only buy $200 worth of dollars on a monthly basis through their bank account, right? And using and so the problem is that even if they have dollars on their bank account, that doesn't mean that their bank will not seize those dollars if the country is in distress, right? And that is something that people in the country, Argentinians, worked really hard for. So you have control over how many dollars you can buy, and even if you buy them, you might not be able to use them because they can get seized. So um, in the end, people are just trying to look at their own safety, right? They want to, they want to protect themselves, and there is nothing wrong with it. It's like is in human nature try to be safe, right? And you want to have to be safe yourself and your children, and that's a natural progression that more and more people are learning. If you go in Argentina, Brazil, El Salvador, Venezuela, everyone knows the term tether, right? And they know they're used to use tether as their money, as it's just dollars for them, right? And it's the crazy thing is that we never spent a dime in marketing there because it happened organically. So when you create a product that it grows organically, it means that you created something useful, right? And it grew not because we were good, right, or we were thinking to all the use cases. It grew just because people needed it, and that's probably for good or worse is like the best outcome for a product. So I think that that use case is extremely important and that needs to be supported. Sometimes when I talk to people, even I live part of my time in Switzerland. I move in Europe a lot, and when I talk to people, sometimes they don't understand why either Bitcoin or stablecoins are needed, right? Because Europe is in general is a wealthy group of countries, quote unquote wealthy group of countries, And so people don't realize that maybe, just maybe, there is someone else in this world that is living in a different condition. And what is true for a certain country might not be true for another one, right? You said you have family in Sri Lanka, but don't think that Italy is a is a wealthier country in a way, right? So it's like that we have still euro. We have seen the loss of euro against the dollar. It's not probably that big compared again to OKR, but it's things are getting unpredictable, and with this geopolitical uncertainty, things might get actually worse and worse pretty quickly. So having a lifeline and an accessible lifeline to people, I think, is part of human rights.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to chat a little bit about, I guess, maybe this is getting to, we were talking earlier a bit about how Tether is across multiple blockchains, right? Across, like Liquid and plus some, shitcoin chains. But I'm also curious to get your view on some of the different protocols. Now, I know obviously Bitfinex is an investor and has people working in, say, RGB. Also, there's, Synonym with Omnibolt, and then Lightning Labs have Taro as well, which is perhaps another competing, similar, has some similarities to RGB. So I'm curious your view on those protocols. How you see Tether? Would Tether be going and traveling on all of those, or just say Omnibolt and RGB because those are the ones that Bitfinex has some investment into?
Well, no, I think that the role of Tether is, as long as the technology is there and can be used with a good degree of safety, should be supported, right? So the fact that we invested in RGB and Omnibolt before Taro, right, and we will continue to do that. For us, it's important to invest in R&D. So Taro has an approach, Omnibolt has another approach, and RGB has yet another approach. They have some overlapping, but they are all good for same or different use cases, and we should be supportive of all these solutions. It's not like we don't want to, as long as the technology is there and it's good, we want to be supportive of that. So we have a great relationship with Lightning Labs. We have a great we of course are funding different projects, and to me is like maybe these are not the ultimate solutions. There is something even more, even farther to research. So, for example, we are, what if we could build, better lightning channels, or like more efficient, have maybe more efficient routing and so on. So, you never know. And the only thing, the only way to know is to hire great, talented people that will spend some time in researching, testing, proving, and maybe some of these protocols will, in a, let's say, day-to-day mass scale use case, will fail, right? Maybe they are not really ready to be, or they might not fulfill the requirements for mass adoption. And then you keep moving on. But if you don't try, if you don't invest, you will never know, right? So that's what we are doing. So we plan to be supportive of all the different flavors, as long as, of course, all the premises in terms of security are there.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be interesting to see, and I presume then that for people who are designing products, building services for people in markets that have high inflation, right? The Sri Lankas of the world, or the Venezuelas of the world, then perhaps it would be useful to have wallets and applications that support both Bitcoin and Lightning, obviously, but potentially also have support for Tether on, RGB, Omnibolt, all of these kinds of things. So they kind of have like a multi currency wallet that easily allows them to sort of flip back and forth if they need to between Bitcoin and Tether in that particular use case, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that I see a world in which you're maintaining your main wealth in Bitcoin, and then when needed, you just flip some of a small portion to USDT, just to pay for the things you need in that specific moment in time, right? So I myself, I want to see hyper Bitcoinization and Bitcoin used as a standard, right? We need more services that are, and more companies that are actually valuing themselves based on how many satoshis or Bitcoin they hold, rather than always thinking back to the fiat standard.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I'm curious to see where that develops. Also, wanted to chat a little bit about Keet as well. So I had a quick play around with So for listeners, Keet.io is this kind of like a Zoom competitor in a way. So could you tell us a little bit about Keet and this whole idea of Holepunch? So what is it? What's the connection here?
Yeah, so a few years ago, Matthias Bus, myself, and we are big proponents of peer-to-peer web, right? In the 90s, when the web started to grow in adoption, was actually truly peer-to-peer, right? Web was created for knowledge sharing, right, and access to knowledge. That is one of the biggest achievements of humanity. But then more companies started to look at it and started to create the services that were fully centralized. And there is this concept that most of these services are actually free services, right? Social networks and Zoom, and for many, and WhatsApp is all free. And if it's all free, then you start thinking how they can cover the cost of this of their infrastructures, right? So because they are immense costs in terms of hundreds of millions, if not billions per year. Now, of course, you are the product, right? The data you're producing with a video, audio call, with sharing content, sharing chats, text, everything that you can think about, what you are producing is their product, and actually is the way for them to make money. Now, myself and I've been always a big proponent on the fact that things should be fully decentralized, and Matthias myself started thinking and discussing 3 years ago. So this project goes back 3 years, well, actually 5 years, but 3 years. We founded with Bitfinex Tether and Hypercore, that is his company. We founded this concept of Holepunch. To make it easy and short, the comparison is, imagine, I'm sure you're familiar, and your listeners will be familiar with BitTorrent as a technology, right? BitTorrent is that unstoppable file sharing network. And BitTorrent had many interesting protocols. Was using the distributed hash table called DHT. That is a key value database that is distributed. And then use hole punching, that is a way to connect two devices behind firewalls without passing through a central server. And the third technique was swarming. That is a way, so if you remember when you were seeding a file, and the more people were downloading the file from you, they could start resharing the file among themselves. So the more people were accessing the file, the download for everyone was becoming faster. So we discussed a lot, and we thought, okay, but this is great technology, right? We have been found of that technology as actually unstoppable communication technology for the last 14 years. And by the way, Bitfinex has internally in the Bitfinex private network, we use the very same technology to create our microservices system that are powering Bitfinex. That's why Bitfinex never goes down on when under load, because we are using this very technique internally to to create this high resiliency. And basically what we said is, okay, but BitTorrent is just for static files. What if we could reuse the very same technology to create for live data streams? So when you are on a call, when you are sharing trading signals, when you are doing almost everything in your day-to-day life, you are creating live data streams. But usually these data streams are going to centralized servers, right? So now we are on Zencastr, or there is Riverside, there is Zoom, but think about it, right? So if I want to call you and talk to you, why we should use a central server? What is the reason, right? So because the reality is that there is no reason, right? So you have an IP address, I have an IP address, and we should be able to connect to each other without passing through someone else's server, right? So that is the insanity that we are used to in our life. And even more so, the other narrative is that even if devices and physical desktop computers could theoretically do connections one-to-one without central servers, mobile phones instead would not be able to do that because they are limited. And that is the other biggest lie. Mobile phones are probably more powerful than your desktop, right? So the new M1 laptop that of Apple has the same chips on the mobile phone and the desktop, and actually the mobile phone is extremely optimized, right? So it can do things that are quite important, rendering, taking amazing photos, really shooting 4K videos. So everything that can be, and that requires CPU, GPU, and so on from the phone. So the fact that you cannot connect directly is really a big lie, and the fact that you need a central server is a big lie. So usually you could argue that you need a central server because you are behind a firewall, right? You are at home. I cannot easily connect to you, right? So if I want to do a phone call to you, a video call, then how my traffic can reach to you and vice versa. But that's why, that is what BitTorrent does. BitTorrent was using this technique called hole punching that is allowing to bypass firewalls in a certain condition. Well, it works. We are proving that works all the time. We enhance this technique, but is a technique that is cooked into all the routers and firewalls, and allows if the connections are agreed to start from the internal side. So all the connections are, you can always connect to the outside, but the firewall blocks connection from the outside, right? But if we all both start the connection from the inside, and we have a third party that sends specific type of packet to both of us in the same time frame, then you can establish a direct connection without any central servers. Simple as that. Well, it's not that simple, but it's simple as that. Now, we could enter in all the crazy details if you want, but long story short, this proves that you can establish a connection that can go between two computers, two devices, two phones. Now, the benefits, and this is why we created Keet as a first demonstration of this technology, is that with Keet, now we can have a chat. We can reuse the DHT, that is that key value store, as a meeting point for people that want to create a room, right? So you want to create a room where you have like 10 friends. One create the room as a link that is actually a pub key of the room that gets stored on the DHT. So the others can reach out and find the room through the DHT. Then you have hole punching that allows people to all these friends, peers, to connect to each other without a central server. And now suddenly you realize that, first of all, using Zoom, for example, there are many concerns. First of all so the technical limitations are that Zoom has to compress your bandwidth and reduce the quality of your video and audio, because there are millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people using it, right? So they need to save bandwidth. Otherwise, their bandwidth will choke. As much as they have bandwidth, it will choke, right? It's centralized, so there is no way around. And so with Keet, you actually don't need to do that, right? You can decide the quality of your video because there is a slider. But actually, you have to take a shower before using Keet, because we can get you the highest quality video calls ever made, right? So if you have anything on your skin, you will see that, right? And then the crazy thing is that we are using to describe Keet, and the advancement that we have is, imagine that we are on a Zoom call, and I want to share with you a 3 gigabyte file, a video file, right? A video that I shooted. I drop it in the chat, and this file will go to my computer needs to upload this file to Zoom servers. It takes 2 hours. And of course, Zoom servers limit at 100 megabytes. So, but let's make it by hypothesis that you can do that. So you upload 3 gigabytes, it takes 2 hours, then everyone can start downloading it and see the file. It takes like 4 hours, and super annoying, is not real time. But with Keet, you have a 3 gigabyte file, so no limitation, could be even 1 terabyte file for what you care, because there is no infrastructure, it's just your bandwidth. So you drop a file in the chat in Keet, and all your friends can press play, and they can start streaming directly from you. And then they can swipe the slider to 2 hours and a half, and their computer will just ask for the chunk of data that it wants and need at that time. So it will not download everything. You can just stream in and sweeping and taking the chunks of the video that you want. So you have a much higher quality video calls, lower latency because you don't need to pass through central service, you go directly. You can share bit files with no limitation and immediately can be streamed. And the beauty of it is that you even imagine that you have 1,000 people call, because you can do that with Keet. You will be able to do that with Keet. And you share a file that a 3 gigabyte file. A question would be, what if everyone is starting to watch the file, or the video, your bandwidth will choke because they will all use your bandwidth. But the beauty of it, remember, we are using BitTorrent technology and there is swarming. So if someone starts playing, the more people are playing the file, they're actually sharing the chunks among themselves. So it doesn't matter. There is no infrastructure. Everything is super simple. We built all these primitives that allow developers to create applications like Keet extremely easily. Also because the programming language and the technology we're using is the same technology to build websites. So now, from December, when we are going to open source it, everyone that is a front-end developer that can do websites can build fully peer-to-peer applications that can replace things that cost billions of dollars like Zoom.
Fascinating. And I played around actually just earlier today with Federico, funnily enough, just to test it out. And I thought it was interesting. So I think that's probably the other criticism I've seen amongst the communities. They're saying, oh, why isn't it open source? A bunch of Bitcoiners are typically more privacy and security focused. So I'm curious, why wasn't the application open sourced at this point?
So it will be fully open source. Both Keet as an application and the Holepunch as a platform will be open source in December, right? So that was an interesting decision, but I took it Matthias is a big prominent person in open source. I myself as well. I published, on Bitfinex GitHub public repositories. We have more than 200 public repositories, open source repositories, and with MIT license, right? So for us, of course, the goal is to get open source, and Matthias has like 1,000 public repositories, right? So in our mind is always we want to go towards full open source, and there is no question around that. Now, we wanted to avoid the classic crypto play where you release something, after one day you get forked and you get a shitcoin on top of it, right? So we wanted to get as far as possible to create the good use cases to prove that we could cover like the chat, the Zoom replacement. Now we are working on Telegram, like Zoom is video first, but Telegram is text first, and then video as an addition. So we want to cover a few use cases to avoid that someone takes the technology and would be still an early stage and fork it and add the shitcoin on top of it. So we are not pushing this down the throat of everyone. So there is a big alpha logo on top of it. So that people understand that they need to choose to use it, and we have been extremely public about the fact that it's not open source yet and why this is the case. So we want to change that, but also we don't want to lose the opportunity to to use a technology that could be so disruptive and seen used by some Web3 BCs for their to pump and dump something, right? So it is what it is. There is no perfect solution. We are so focused on the technology now that we don't have the time to watch our back for that from happening. So it will happen anyway. We know that, but we want to be at a bit better stage also with the structure of the framework and so on, to actually provide more use cases that are free, as in freedom, rather than pay per talk.
I see. Yeah, and so. Does that mean then there are other applications coming down the line from using the Holepunch, I guess, protocol?
So we are discussing about peer-to-peer VPNs. I believe that is one of the most interesting ones, because nowadays VPNs are blocked because of IP addresses, right? So it's really easy to harvest maybe NordVPN and the pure VPN IP addresses and the infrastructures. to actually blacklist them, so no one can use in a specific country VPNs. But with Keet, you can build the peer-to-peer VPNs, and they would rely on residential addresses, and so then it becomes impossible and unstoppable. So you can do also peer-to-peer mapping, right? So you can actually get that is quite exciting to me, because mapping are, and I believe that the two things that are the most important thing actually of what we should be doing and what should be peer-to-peer should be search engines, right? So all part of my research in university in computer science and math was related to search engines. And to me, that is really an exciting topic. I feel like people shouldn't be told, or the data shouldn't be, or the results shouldn't be sorted based on how much someone is paying Google, but should be more sorted based on the locality of that data, right? So if, for example, I want to come to Sri Lanka, I want to eat well, I want to know what someone living in Sri Lanka running a node providing an index on the best restaurants would think, right? So there is a lot of work in search engine and knowledge sharing that I feel we stopped and was stopped due to incentives from big tech companies. And also, there is an interesting and really underrated problem in this world, right? So in Europe, there is something called GDPR and a bunch of laws that prevent that tell you as a company operating in a certain country that data should reside in the territory that you are operating in. And even more so, that is true for is even more true for public administrations. For example, Switzerland, Denmark, France, Italy. So there are laws that would prevent you to use communication suites that will move your data that you are producing, video, audio, and sending files and so on, outside of the boundaries of your country, right? Or outside of boundaries that have different rules. For example, you might still be sending data outside of countries that are still anyway part of the GDPR consortium in a way, but you cannot you shouldn't send data to countries, especially private and important data like public administration produced data, to a communication system owned by other countries. In Denmark, I was talking to Matthias. There is this recently, they had these schools all buying Google Chromebooks, right? And then they stopped that because they understood that there was nothing preventing Google from harvesting and indexing children homework, right? So this is going to be more and more important. I was talking to a few public administrations in Switzerland, and they said we would use Keet because we have a big problem. We are using other solutions that we shouldn't be using, but there is no other good solution. So we need to be able to talk and have a good talk with high quality, with resiliency and so on. It has to work, but we need to be able to use this, and the data has to remain in our own country. But whatever other solution that you, as Zoom or Google, you don't have you don't know where the traffic is passing through. You don't know which data center everyone is hitting. But with Keet, it's actually peer-to-peer. So if everyone is Switzerland, the data will remain in Switzerland, right? And if you choose to talk with someone that is not outside of Switzerland, that is a choice that the administration or anyone can do. But that information, that communication line will just get to his house and residential IP address without passing through centralized servers. So there is much more to, these guys have built a privacy, a privacy chat. It's not that. It's something that more and more data and data centers will be weaponized around the world. Because imagine you are an Italian and you are using all the social networks and you cloud storages and so on, and eventually something changed in the geopolitical setup, and then your data is not anymore your data. When things hit the fan, things can change pretty quickly. So you want to have a system that allows you to communicate, to store data and so on in a safe way where you retain control over your data. And that's why I'm so critical about Web3 in many cases, because it feels to me that it's still Web2 with a different hat. So they are not solving the problem of centralization of data. They're just trying to tell you that, yes, before in Web 2, the big tech companies were making all the money. And now instead they can leave you some crumbles, so you can make you feel like you're making some money that is probably 0.1% of how much value it gets squeezed from your own data. And yet, if there is a big issue internationally, you won't have your data is not anymore yours. It's also written in terms of services most of the time. The data is not yours. So we wanted to fight that back and give an opportunity, an alternative, because we feel like the world needs is going into a place that is always more dystopian and Orwellian.
Excellent. And so, with the Keet application, that's the other one. You mentioned as well the possibility of building in Bitcoin and Lightning payments as well. So, could you tell us a little bit about that and what that would look like?
Sure. So Bitcoin and Lightning payments are quite interesting because we feel like and that is a few days ago I made to explain this. I made a meme was taken from the Joker Dark Knight. When he said it's not about the money, it's about sending a message, right? So one of the questions we had with the Keet is why you are not using Lightning as a signaling server or data distribution system, because it is already installed, has some nodes around and so on. And I personally really love Lightning, as we said, but the analogy that I made is not about money. Means Lightning is built for the primary use case is protocol that deliver wealth, transfer wealth, and route wealth. So if you want to send 1,000 Satoshi, 1 million Satoshi is just the same payload, the same data that needs to be routed. Of course, they still have protocols to transfer data around, but the other part is it's about sending a message. So it's about the analogies. It's about sending data. So it's not about sending wealth and transfer wealth. Keet and Holepunch is about sending data. Now, with the Keet and the Holepunch, we wanted to use the best protocols that we could develop that would offer the highest throughput to send megabyte, gigabyte, terabytes of data around the world without any limitations. And also we needed the freedom to innovate and move fast, right? So instead, Lightning has bold specifications and so on. So it would be really hard and slow for us to adapt to that. That is not even the use case for which this protocol has been assembled and put together. So for us, but we recognize and we know that, of course, it's not we are not living in communism, right? So people need to be paid for the work they are doing. So the SDK, the Holepunch SDK, is offering primitives to provide payments. So we are offering a Lightning Network integration, so people can decide to be paid in Bitcoin for the services that they are providing, or USDT.
Excellent. And so would that be like built into the application then, and like it would show an invoice, that kind of thing? People can scan and pay it, or maybe connect their Lightning node. Like, is that kind of what you're envisioning?
Yeah, so the first approach that we are considering is using Greenlight from Blockstream, that is like a non-custodial hosted on their premises node, right? So because we, in order to follow the spirit of peer-to-peer, of course, it has to be non-custodial. This is like, will be fully open source, non-custodial, and so on. So that is really important. At the same time, we wanted to make it a mass application, right? So people shouldn't, so if we, the beauty of it is that I really believe that Keet and the other products that we can build on top of Holepunch are actually the key tool to increase the installed monetary base of Bitcoin 100 times in the next 3 years. So it means that we are the first company in a certain sense to build actual mass adoption applications. All right. So if you go on the Keet website, it's not like, okay, there is this crypto token and all these complex
Yeah.
financial incentives. It's a chat, right? So
Yeah.
use it as a chat. And we had 60,000 downloads in the first 2 weeks, right? And there is not even mobile. So I believe that it can really spin up, and there is no cost for us. It's just a bunch of developers developing and contributing the code, right? So there is no infrastructure to run. So it can be used by 1 billion people without any problem because there's actually no cost. So that's why I feel like is important to have something like a green light. And of course, we are also adding the advanced mode where you can have your running your own node and connect to your own node and so on. But we wanted to start with the green light initially because it was just offering a faster way to provide self custody, Lightning, and Bitcoin access to and Rails to people.
Of course, yeah, sure. And listeners, if you're interested, I've got an interview with Christian Decker where we speak a little bit about Greenlight, so you can check that out. And also curious as well, like, does Keet itself, or does Holepunch, I guess, does it have a business model itself, or is it just sort of funded as a project by Bitfinex? Like, what's the model there for the sustainability
So
ongoing?
the underlying protocol, so the Holepunch protocol, will be always free and remain free, as well Keet will remain free. So we have other ideas, right? So as we said, there are plenty of services that can be built on top of Holepunch. But the beauty of it is that Holepunch as a company will not have more control than others on the network. There is no network, right? There is no global state network. It's just a bunch of peers creating direct communication with each other. So any developer we are creating basically an even playing playing field ground to create applications. So any developer can actually take an existing Web2 application and build it on top of a Holepunch and get paid for it, and will not get any cut out of it. And that's how it should be, right? So we want to create applications that generate revenue, definitely, and we plan to build a startup fund to make that happen. So to fund companies that create value on top of a Holepunch, but not value that need to have yet another token, first of all. So we want services to be useful, and go back to the word, that crazy word before, all this ICO boom, where if in order to make money, you have to create something useful, right? So that's something that I quite miss. And I think that with Holepunch, we can recreate that type of environment. And eventually, what we have now, we are seeing now in crypto, is not sustainable. So we will not be different than anyone else. We want to we want to give a platform for everyone. And keep in mind that this and the Keet, you attested Keet, right? The entire interface, the application was created by one front-end developer, one only, right? So one person was able, using the Holepunch framework, was able to create all that user experience, right? So that's why I think it's super powerful and is creating this field where everyone is at the same level and they can easily create applications that, because you forget about everything. It's just like you hook together, you puzzle, you Lego together different things, and boom, you have an application that can scale to billions of users. So that's why we are really, really excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to see, and I think it's interesting to, I guess, pull together some of the different insights. Like, I guess for probably myself and many listeners who maybe in years gone by, if you used BitTorrent, one of the funny or the key insights was this idea that every peer has their own upload bandwidth as well. Whereas previously the model was, oh no, the server has to have all this bandwidth just so each person can download. But actually in BitTorrent, and similarly with Holepunch, it's like each peer is downloading, but also is uploading off their own connection, whatever high connection or low connection they have, they're also uploading. And so yeah, I guess I'm curious to see where that all goes. So I think that's probably a good spot to finish up. I mean, we've been chatting for a little while, but definitely exciting to hear all the different things that are going on. Paolo, where can listeners find you and find the different things we've mentioned online?
So Twitter, Paolo Ardoino, otherwise on GitHub, PRDN, or you can go on keet.io. There is the Discord channel. There are all already a huge community there, a ton of crazy ideas to work on. So stay tuned also for the mobile version. I think the next time we could do the next podcast on Keet. I actually we did 2 podcasts on Keet already, so it's not it's fairly easy, but we are also building toolings for doing podcasts on Keet. So with
Oh,
really
okay.
high quality. So maybe next time we can test that. But I'm the guy that makes memes a lot on Twitter.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining me, Paolo.
Thank you, Stephen.